Hi, it is Wednesday at noon Pacific, 3 o'clock if you're coming from the east, and that means it is Writing Wednesday with me, Janet Fitch. I'm a novelist and I've taught fiction for many years, and this is my chance to answer the questions of emerging writers of any age, um, any condition. I'll answer your questions about craft, answer your questions about the writer's life, psychological issues, you know, technical issues, issues, business issues, whatever you would like to ask. I am here for you um, to address your writing concerns. And if you have questions for me today, put them in the comments section, and I will, in the comments, yeah, in the chat, and I will be able to answer you as we go along. And if you have questions for me in between times, write to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I will be happy to answer your questions. So today we have a topic. This is for Sarah. Sarah, if you are here, we're getting to your question. The question is about mapping. So mapping is very interesting. I'm a people have said I'm a writer of place, and I believe that place is everything. I have a my brain is maps the world. Hi, Sarah. I'm doing your question. Um, it maps the world. It maps relationships. It's very interesting. Some people are geographically. Hi, Fazena. Um, some people are geographically challenged, and some people, the one that's going up the stairs, is geographically challenged. He works a little differently, but he maps too. Um, and I always have to know where everything is. I like maps. I have a very real sense of where things are in relation to other things. I like to see things schematically. So here's the question. Hi, Janet. Not sure if you've touched on this in past Writing Wednesdays. No, we haven't. But I'd love to know how you go about blocking scenes. So that's what actors do. They block a scene, they get the actors together and they have them stand here, stand there. They tape the floor where the actor is going to hit his marks. That's the mark that they hit. And so this is a question about blocking scenes. For instance, sometime last week, I got through scenes in my last novel, Chimes of the Lost Cathedral. So Arcady is one of the villains. There are several villains in that book, and Arcady is in many ways the worst of them. So I got through the Arcady scenes in Chimes, and what they really left me wondering was, how did you track where the three characters were in the enclosed space of Arcady's chamber? He's kind of holed up in an abandoned monastery in what was called Petrograd and is now called Petersburg. So that you ended up with one of the characters behind the villain, having swiped. I don't want to, completely give the plot away, but she has found a weapon. They're being held hostage by this guy, and uh, one of the strange characters has ended up with a weapon. Um, and do you mentally or physically sketch the layout of the room? Couch, windows, table with a tin of Marifet there. There was a lot of cocaine smuggling in during the Russian Revolution, and this particular bad guy is behind a lot of the trafficking because during the Civil War, as in the First World War, um, many of the Russian soldiers were kind of living on cocaine. Um, they were stealing it from the medics. I mean, it was not, all kinds of things happen in wartime. Um, and Did you sketch the layout of the room, couch, windows, table with the Coke on it, which has to be written within Marina's reach, my protagonist, for various reasons? There's all kinds of grotesque stuff in that room, and I have to have it stable, like where everything is, so that every time I talk about, um, describe the action in the room, somebody looks up and sees the whatever, the Christ on the wall, or um, so I have to know which way people are looking, what's on the wall, and it has to be stable so that it's always in the same place. You can't. The reader has a hard time picturing things if they continue to be in flux. Um, the uh, and then layer it over the dialogue and emotional beats. Um, I don't think it I don't it it probably feels that way to the reader, that it's layered one over the other. Um, you know, Whereas as you're writing, to me, it's a rhythmic thing, so you go from dialogue to uh, to the created world, to the inner world, and it's a flow, so I don't think of them like setting up one thing and then layering something on top of it, generally. But you do have to have all those layers. You do have to know where you're moving from what to what, so you do have to know what's in the room. The three layers of landscape, I know I've talked about that before, where it's what's intimate, like what can actually be reached by a character, touched, what is the size of the room, and then what's the master shot, what's going on outside of the room. So you have sounds outside of the room. You have light coming in from outside, noise from coming in from outside. The sound of all the senses is the best for doing that layering of dimensionality, um, from large to small and back and forth. Sound is very good. You can only touch things that are right up close to your character. You can smell things and see things in the room. Sound can be any layer. Um, so, did it happen at a later pass or an earlier one? And putting the setting the setting, does it come after I've done dialogue or before? Um, it all evolves at the same time. For me, it's like I have a scene. My character is dragged into this room in the monastery. She's been kidnapped and being dragged in by children. He's running a gang of children. Yeah, it's not good. There were no cops, the Civil War era, in the Russian Civil War after the revolution, was complete lawlessness. There were secret police, which are the political police, the Cheka, but there were no actual police, no cops keeping order. So, gangs ran this town. Um, yeah, not good, but pretty dramatic. And So she's dragged in, and I stay with the character. So, what do I see first? What do I see next? What do I see next? And as the character inhabits the room, that's when I get out my often. I use big pads, and I've actually, it's hard for me to find the ones from Chimes of Lost Cathedral. I think I've rolled them up and put them in storage. But here's what they look like. I use big pads like this or even bigger, and I do draw the room as I figure as I the room reveals itself to me. I'll draw. Let's see. Do I have any pictures of that room? Um, mm, let's see. This one's even bigger. I like to map it, so I keep it stable in my mind. And sometimes the mapping isn't worth showing anybody because it just will look like scribbles to you. But you know, things like this. This looks like there's a cult in the book, and in Revolution of Marina M, and that's I want to know where the river is, where the ice house is, etc. And so it ends up looking like that, which doesn't mean anything to you, but to me, it stabilizes what I'm creating. So if I have Marina come into this room in the monastery, say, the scene that I created in Chimes of Lost Cathedral, she comes into this room. She's dragged in by children, murderous gang kids, the orphans of the Civil War, um, working for this crazy guy, and they're pretty crazy too, and they're on cocaine. Um, what's the first thing she sees? Well, the first thing she sees is him because she knows him. She knows him from before. They've had other encounters, so this is like the person I have tried to avoid. I see him. I see what he's wearing. It's very grotesque. He's dressed as a priest. It's because he's taken up residence in the monastery. So he's duded himself up like an archbishop or something. So crazy. And then, so she'll notice him. She'll notice what would be like right by him, like candles dripping all over the place. She notices there is something really grotesque on the wall behind him, and the whole thing is overwhelming. Then, as she settles in, it's like you get the furniture. I'm, standing, or I'm sitting, or he's standing, or he's sitting, and you see the furniture. Um, the more she can calm down, the more she'll start noticing what's on the desk. Or he wants to show her something on the desk, and she's going to walk around, and I might map that. Um, how she walks, where the furniture is, helps you set the scene because you're going to have a conversation about something. And believe me, when I write, I have no idea what that conversation is going to be about. Those are the tools of fiction writing, that I have to live that scene along with my character to have any idea what is going to be happening in that scene. No idea. So she notices, she hears something, and then she looks around for the source of the noise, and she sees another person in the room. So there's a couch, and then there's this other person in the room. And so I know there's a couch, and then I have to decide where do I want the light to be coming from, because I describe, a lot of description comes through light in any scene. You describe things in terms of light falling on them. So it's very important to know where the source of light is. If it's day or night, is it coming in through windows? Is it coming from candles? Is it coming from, some overhead fluorescent light? Not in this scene. It's candlelit. So I have to know where the candles are. where what's holding them. Is it on a low table? Is it on the floor? Is it on a high table? Um, and drawing a map keeps that consistent. The consistency is what's really important. And by physically mapping, you keep the consistency of your scene. Um, did it happen a later past or an early one? No, you can see it happens all at once, because until I'm in the scene, I don't know that there is anything. I don't know where anything is. I have to figure it out once she's in there. Um, I guess what I'm interested in is the conceptualizing of space with such specificity. Of course, you don't have to talk about the scene specifically to avoid spoilers. You'll forget immediately what I said, right? Um, but that one struck me as being tightly staged. Yeah, every single scene in those books, and every book that I write is very tightly conceived. I have to know where everything is, where the light's coming from, what's underfoot, because you have to know how noisy is it going to be when the character moves around. Um, the calmer the character, the more they're going to observe small things like what's on a table or on a windowsill. Um, how nosy they are. Are they going to go through the desk or the wastebasket or whatever? So a lot of it comes from character. Um, and then you sketch it out just so it stays stable in your mind. And then you can use the couch, or they can get up and walk around, and there's the wine is on this table and the candles are on that table, and there's this horrible book that's on a high table, as I recall. So where's that? Um, and then it also works in terms of um, mapping of the apartment in the parents' apartment in every location in the book is very carefully depicted. I have to know exactly where everything is. Um, in Marina M, the first the Revolution of Marina M, the parents' apartment, like what is a grand apartment in the Russian, you know, minor aristocracy? What does that look like in St. Petersburg, which was the capital, and then becomes Petrograd, and becomes a collective apartment, collectivized apartment? What does that look like? How many rooms? How are they arranged? And I just had to know. And I dug in, and I went to, when I went to Russia, for research, I certainly saw the grand apartment where Akhmatova ended up living with husband number two, um, and his ex-wife and everybody else, because you couldn't get away from anybody. There was no housing. Um, um, so things that I saw kind of blended in, but the best of all was a website about the great collective apartments in St. Petersburg, um, that called Kommunalka, and it was a guy who taught at Colgate, I think, who um, went back to the collective apartment that he grew up in, and he started interviewing people in that apartment and in other apartments, and there are floor plans of these great apartments, and you can see how they're laid out, and they're all different. I picked one that I based that apartment on. I picked one that had a beautiful, beautiful coat room. And if you've read the first one, The Revolution of Marina M, you know that there's a very romantic scene that happens in the cloakroom there. And so I got to see what that looked like, and how there was a wing where the family lived, and then a wing that had the kitchen and the servants' quarters in the other wing, and I kind of liked that layout seemed to suit my character's family when when we see her to begin with. There's this grand soiree, New Year's soiree. Uh, so I had to have a feeling for that apartment. I used that apartment a lot, and I had another grand apartment that I use in Tribes of Lost Cathedral. I use I use photographs. I go online and look for. I have a whole section of Chimes of Lost Cathedral that's in a hotel, a very fine hotel, or had been before the revolution. Um, that became an orphanage in during the revolution, and that was my character worked there, and so I had to have a really clear picture of not only that hotel, um, but where it faced, like where the rooms would look out onto, because I had to have that third layer, what's outside. I had to have some feel for the lobby and how it was situated. It was the entrance on the main drag, Nevsky Prospect, or was it facing Mikhailovsky Square? You know, how was it facing? And I had to be very confident about the streets, the names of the squares, the orientation of buildings. The House of Arts along was a very important part of the second book, where all the intelligentsia gathered under the protection, such as it was, of Maxim Gorky, kind of saved the Russian intelligentsia during the revolution. Um, so I was able to, just draw maps. I drew maps. And I drew maps of all kinds of stuff, just timelines, on these big sheets, because I had to really get it in my head how a revolution every week is like a month. Every month is like a year. The changes that happen. And I had to be really careful. I printed out a couple of things for you to see, kind of mapping. Um, I did the Russian Civil War. The After the revolution comes Civil War, and I had timing of when armies were coming towards Petersburg, what was happening, so the preparation for this assault, where's the noise coming from, where are the guns coming from. I had to be very sure in myself where that was going to be. So this is in my on my website, but this is the maps. This is me mapping part of the Russian Civil War. I got a map of the area and started noticing where things were, where she was going to be, where's this person going to be. Um, and so I'm always doing that, always. Um, you can map your sequential scenes. I'm very careful about trying to vary up indoor, outdoor, day, night, one person scene, two-person scene, multi-person scenes. So there's a real variation in the tone and number and scene of a book. I like when you move around, you don't get stuck somewhere. Mapping, uh, uh, and then to have a stable room, back to the room, the Arcady scene. Um, once you have the room, then you can say, oh, well, does it have curtains? What would the curtains be like? Oh, does it have whatever? What would that be like? What would a couch in in a monastery? But, you know, what would you know, the, I don't know if it was a bishop, or what kind of, I did at the time know who's you know, whose dwelling Arcady took up in, but it was obviously the head of the household. Um, what kind of windows, what kind of couch would there be? What would he have brought in for his own grotesque tastes? Um, what do I need in that scene? What kind of condition are are things in? Stuffing coming out? Um, how high is the ceiling? How is it heated? Is there a big there's a big fireplace. An open fireplace, not a common thing in a Russian palace or any Russian room at all. Open fire. You don't see an open fireplace normally. You see the heat um, with a like a porcelain, if it's nice, a porcelain stove, like a big barrel shaped thing with a door, and you keep it. It doesn't lose as much heat to radiation, to as an open fireplace. But there are open fireplaces, and I put one in that scene because I liked it. But I had to always be conscious where it is, where's the light coming from. You get warmer as you get closer to it. You know, where is it drafty? What's on the floor? Are the rugs? Is it bare? Did they strip it? Um, so, see, Blair says, how did you select what to include? Do you write it all and then cut? Or do you think what tone, effect you want and write only what serves that? Uh, it comes when the character needs to do something. And then I have to decide what how how plush is that couch when she sits down on it? What's it stuffed with? You know, what's it made of? So it's I don't write it all and then cut. No. I think about what I need in the moment and then build it out as the character needs to sit on something. I decide what chair it is that they're going to sit on. Um, and what kind that would work, and then that that's the chair that goes there. So Sarah says spatial awareness becomes even more important when it's referred back to later in the book, linked to a salient or painful memory, as the character revisits a place where something traumatic happened, and they're going to remember only like a couple of things. They're going to remember maybe the glint of light on this amethyst ecclesiastical ring that in no way belongs on this guy. And maybe the grotesque Christ on the wall. But nobody's going to forget that. Yeah, so you need it to be stable so that you can move through it. But I create it as I go. I don't. I don't plan it ahead. How do I know how many chairs? I didn't even know that there was going to be a third person in that room. I don't know these things. I actually create them as I go. Um, I wanted to show you a couple more mapping things. This is a map of, sort of a map of life, part of a map. It only printed out half. Um, of an amazing book called Life, a User's Manual by Georges Perec, and Perec. And I think that I've talked about him, this book especially, Georges Perec. I'm putting it in the chat. Um, and that is a novel that describes the contents of a Parisian apartment house um, using, it's a series of games. And so it moves on the knight's gambit, the knights move. So over 2, down 3. So if you think of apartment building as a big grid, then we move from this guy's, kitchen to this person's bathroom, to this person's salon, to this person's, kids' room, and move around that way. And each chapter in the book has certain things that he has to do and certain things that he cannot do. So every one of them has, this is in French, unfortunately, but each of them has uh, a like a theme, so a special thing that marks the object. So in one it's volume, in one it's surface, in one it's paintings, in one it's youth, you know, and there's 42 of these. Um, then in each of them there is a an era, a substance, um, a let's see, I mean, there's just so much. Kind of music, um, a color, and so he maps it. So that'd be interesting to do, you know, if you're thinking thematically about your chapters and think, okay, that's a that's going to be a green chapter. I usually assign it's more characters. Each character has their own color. Each character has their own scent. Each character has their own music, often textures, smell. So, uh, if, for instance, um, sometimes it's just including more of their scent or their, you know, color. But sometimes it's the room that has that color. Um, the So mapping is just essential. I have each of my books, especially the Russian books. You could actually map the LA books too, but I didn't need a map for you in the other ones. Here's in the opening of Revolution of Marina M, there's a map of Petrograd, which is Petersburg after the revolution became Petrograd. Um, and it shows me where all of the characters lived. All of the scenes in that book take place in the central, most of them in the central area of St. Petersburg. So Hotel Europa, right on Nevsky Prospect. So you can see how far that is, and also it helps you remember, oh, yeah, that's right. You remember the scene, you remember why it took so long to walk to the cemetery, that kind of thing. You can follow along in the book. Where are certain bridges, where are certain scenes that parts of that city just recur and recur and recur. And as a reader, I would want to know, like, where is the Chernyshevsky Bridge? Um, where was that apartment where all the kids were squatting? Um, uh, all the poets. Um, when I talk about the Fontanka River, like, what does that look like? It's concentric circles, like in Amsterdam, the canals of Amsterdam. Um, then in the second book, it's that's the Russian Civil War, and I wanted to map out basically the furthest extent of the white successes, the height of the Civil War, where it looked like the Red Army was going to fail. It looked like the revolution was going to go back to the Czar. And so I worked like a dog on that. And then we had a professional map maker who made the last one, also made these maps. And then this is 1919, so 2 years later after that other map you saw, and the new situation where everybody was living and so on. So people could keep track of that. Um, yeah, and I think there are some people really appreciated getting the having the maps, and then some people probably could care less. Um, let's see. Hi, Llewellyn. Creating as one goes, improvisation by writing. I like your suggestion of color song assignment to each character. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You want to know what so and so smells like. Um, what's their, what's their color? What's their style? Um, yeah, I keep careful notes on that kind of stuff once I've created it. I create it first and they go, oh, that guy wears plaid, wears a big plaid. That person smells like wood shavings. That person smells like I have a character in the Revolution of Marina M and Chimes she runs throughout, named Varvara, who has black, dusty hair, cropped. She's the Bolshevik. She's the revolutionary, and she smells like pencil shavings, chalk, and you know at times gunpowder. But she has that, everything. Her color is black, and her things associated like graphite, that smell, leather sometimes. Um, their two boyfriends smell very different, and because she has sexual um, uh, intimacies with both of them, she's very aware of how they smell, um, and that's fun, you know, um, not to overlook that part of physical reality. Um, yeah, improvisation by writing. I don't know how else to do it. Like, how do I know how many couches are going to be in there? How do I know, you know, what's going to be in uh, how the orphanage is going to inhabit a grand hotel and what that's going to look like, especially because my character had been to that hotel in the first book at when it was still a grand hotel. She saw an elderly aunt there with her mother, and it was very proper and scary, and how you had to behave, and extremely old world. And then she's working there when it's a Soviet orphanage, and it's just bedlam, bedlam. Uh, and she's doing her best with it, but it's pretty overwhelming. Um, Sarah says, in a couple of weeks, I'm planning a day trip to a nearby town where some of my important scenes are set, trying to go as close as I can, uh, as close as I can go to where the scene takes place in late April. Yeah, any bit of information you get, the light, the feeling in the air, how dry, how wet, um, anything having to do with the weather, and then noticing how things are laid out and drawing pictures of it, getting photographs. Um, it'd be super useful. I went to Petersburg twice. I'd been there once as a student, but I went back for research twice, and that's exactly what I was looking for. Is what is where, and I wanted to see things that I'd only read about but never had seen, like a ration card, um, a what they called a bourgeoiska, which was like a do-it-yourself stove that they made out of a tin can and vented out the window because there was not enough wood to fill those giant Russian stoves anymore. They were burning books and the stair rails and any kind of wood they could get a hold of. Um, so Laura says, does their color match their mood, personality? Yeah, the color matches their personality. Uh, there's something about them that seems very orange, or seems very green, seems very purple. Um, I think it works below the level of consciousness for the reader. I don't think the reader necessarily notices, but I think they feel it. Sarah says, if I want to just get a feel of the town in that season, um, what would you suggest as the top things I look for? I know you'll say quality of light, smells, etc. Um, does it seem, what's the emotion? Does it seem like crouched and kind of a, you've seen these, some towns I just think of as mean towns or secretive towns. I used to live in the Rockies in Colorado, and in small towns, there's always a bad town. That's the one with the saloons and maybe the one hooker in the area. The bad town, very hidden. Like there was this town that was mostly it was mostly like ranching, high country ranching, beautiful, beautiful with the beautiful snow caps and the mesas. It was the foot of Mesa Verde, but there was one town where it was mostly river rafting is their big industry and tourism as opposed to ranching. So the ranchers would look at that town and say, those people are sneaky. They live in that sneaky, they live in a canyon instead of out in the open. Um, uh, you know, different towns have different feel. LA could seem very confusing, can seem very featureless, mile after mile after mile of strip malls and what have you, and just like it's all the same, and there's no center, and I don't understand it. And then somebody like me, who I'm from here, my mother was from here, my grandmother came here, back in the 20s. I look at this place, and every neighborhood has a smell and a feel and a look. I see the foliage, the weather much more specifically than somebody who just landed here from Mars. Um, I, I know where to look for the beautiful, you know, where I think somebody who comes to a place sometimes sees what's on the surface, just confusion and a lot of freeways, you know. Um, uh, so Llewellyn's reading Marina. Thank you. So, Ekisare, what's your advice for a 20-year-old who wants to write? Uh, I would say don't wait. Start with very short work, start with 2-page short stories. I would offer you, there's an exercise that you can see in the archive here of my favorite exercise. It's called the word exercise, where you take a word, and I have a little pouch on my desk with various words. So I'll pick you a word even. Okay, we're going to get you started right away. Okay, here's the word. These words tend to be both nouns and verbs, so they have more associations. The word is egg. So what you're going to do is you're going to figure out your associations with egg. Make a list. Egg sandwich, egging somebody's house, egging somebody on to do some bad prank. Egg, somebody has egg on their face, they embarrass themselves. Make a list of associations and then decide which one you want to write a little story about, which seems to have the most juice. And then write 2 pages double spaced using that word somewhere in there. So there's your first story right there, egg. But if you look at down in the archive here in Writing Wednesday, you'll see a whole um, talk on my favorite exercise. So Bozena says Varvara is one of my favorite characters, powerful, a book in herself. Yeah, she is. She's a true believer. She is a radical and a true believer, and um, for a long time, the girls are very simpatico. I mean, Varvara kind of eggs my character on. Speaking of eggs my character on, and then at some point there is a split where she realizes that there's no that Varvara is an ends justify the means at any cost kind of person, and that Marina's a humanist. She thinks that the ends are part of it, and hurting people is still hurting people. You can't sacrifice that to your ideals, so they do start to split. But they keep coming together because Varvara's grows in power, and often my character needs her. Um, so Sarah says, makes me think everyone should set at least one piece in their hometown or the place they're most familiar with as an exercise in knowing a place deeper than most. Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, my first two books, actually three books, um, were set in LA because I know it so well. I knew what, I could write about Echo Park. I could write about Los Feliz. I could write about the various areas that my character in White Oleander is a foster kid. Um, and I could go and find the house. I remember looking for the house. There's a character in White Oleander, Marvel Turlock. It's one of the foster families that my character is sent to live with. And I knew she was in the valley, and I could sort of picture the kind of neighborhood. So I went there, and then I went looking for the house. And then I found the house, and I sat in front of it and noticed what it looked like, and really, you know, my my old writing teacher, Kate Braverman, used to say, stalk a house, stalk a location, STALK. Go and find the house where they live if you can. Often you know what the house is in your mind because you were there. It was your friend's house, or it was your aunt's house, or you use a lot of things. I know in the book Paint It Black, there's a scene of a student film crew that goes into this beautiful home and, like, wrecks it, basically, as student film crews usually do. And that was an old boyfriend's parents' house. And it's so clear to me uh, that it was really great fun to write the film crew ruining that house, which actually was the film crew was mine, and the house that they wrecked, and we didn't really completely wreck it, was my grandmother's house. She let us shoot there. What a mistake. We didn't ruin it too much. It was my shoot, so I was much better than the film crew in Paint It Black, but it set the scene. But I knew that house that I wanted to use was my old boyfriend's house. Uh, mid-century, modern with a white carpet. It's like, oh. Yeah, it's fun to set stuff in your hometown if you will write about it and write about place. So many people don't write about it place at all. So I'm really glad that you asked the question of mapping. Um, you can map ideas. You can do the what do they call it, where you splatter brainstorming. I do that when I'm stuck. I put something in the middle and then radiate out different ideas, and then I can see, do they fit together? Do I have to choose? What does this lead to this, and this leads to this? And, or do they all eventually lock together, which is very interesting. Mind mapping, yeah, yeah. I love a mind map, and I do that. Geography, that map instinct to map things is so useful in a number of ways. Um, just to track your character's emotionality. My husband finished a novel, and uh, while he was working on the novel, he's very interested in mapping, keeping track of the character's emotional changes, and map that. Um, which is very interesting. So Bozena says, you made Russia seem so much yours. So true. My grandmother, Marina Marchenko, would have loved it. It I I like smaller towns. To me, in fiction, I'd rather use a town that I can really learn, not all about, but learn a great deal about the where you would stand to have a conversation or smoke a cigarette, what you would see in what area of town, what it meant for, say, the poet Bloch, who lived in an area called Kolumna. Um, and what does it mean to live in Kolumna as opposed to where her parents lived, which was in the fancy, it's more of a working person's district. So it tells you something about him socioeconomically. Um, it gives a shading. And I had, and the areas of town are very important to people. If you think about your hometown and think of where, if I'm a kind of a druggy loser, part-time petty thief person, where do I live? If I'm the good church going, whatever, where would I live? If I'm a good, if I'm the dentist, where do I live? If I'm, in a small town, the large animal veterinarian makes a freaking fortune in a ranching community. Where does he live? And where does the banker live? And it helps the reader really get a sense of that town. They're wonderful. There's a map of Faulkner's Yoknapatawpha County, where he set some of his most prominent books, a made-up county, and he mapped them. Where this person lived, where's the bridge, where's the courthouse, where's the holler, where's this and that. He maps the whole thing out because he's returning to it book after book. So it becomes really solidified, not only in his mind, but in our minds. And we want to know. So Sarah said, did you spend a lot of time in the Russian countryside? No, I spent, mm, mm, I took a tour of the Golden Ring, uh, Sustal, Vladimir, etc. Um, bus, on the bus. So I saw a lot from the bus window. But I never lived in that countryside, but I've lived in the countryside. So your experience ties together. I mean, I know what it's like to keep your eye on the weather and how hard it is to bring in a harvest. But wow, reading about how hard it is for when the Russian peasantry during serfdom and afterwards bringing in a harvest in a short season climate like that. I mean, they work 24 hours a day to get the harvest in. They sleep under the wagons. That's how intensely they need to work. Um, so I didn't spend a lot of time in the Russian countryside. If I went back, I would be very interested to go to Izhevsk, where my character spends a good amount of time in the second book, in Chimes of Lost Cathedral, um, that area, uh, just to see it. It's called Udmurtia, and it's a very interesting part of Russia where people are more related to the Sami, to the Finns, and to the Hungarians, and it's the largest uh, percentage of redheads in the world is in Udmurtia. They're very interesting people. So that was interesting. But it wasn't hard for me to imagine peasant life. Um, I'd seen that mud, I knew that weather, you know. Um, so yes, I'd say map everything. I wish I had more of the maps, but you can look at Kommunalka if it still exists. Kommunalka Commonalca dot, I think, Colgate dot edu to see those communal apartments and look at the floor plans and stuff. But yes, definitely draw your room where the couch is, and don't move the couch in the middle of the, have it suddenly facing the window when it was facing away from the window. Very confusing. Well, we have blown through the best part of another hour. Thank you so much for joining me here, and Ekisare. Hope you enjoy the writing exercise. Egg, maybe I'll do an egg too. And wish you good writing. Bye.